All right, Steeler fans, it is time for the winners and losers after the Steelers beat the Denver Broncos in week 2, 13-6. And in this, we have 9 winners and 6 losers. That's a lot of players and aspects of this game that we need to talk about. So let's just cut to the chase. Winners, let's start there. The winners, first winner is the first half offense. What's the stat line? The stat line is they had 189 yards of offense, 13 first downs, and scored 10 points in the first half. Can't speak for you, the person that's listening to this, but I was pretty stoked after the first half. I thought this is great. But there was always a part of me was like, man, they just need more points. Just need more points. Let's put these guys away. Let's not let them hang around. Well, that's not necessarily what happened. We'll get to that in a second. But the first half offense, just like the second half offense last week, did show what the Steelers are capable of. It showed that the Steelers are a team that can get things together. It's just going to take them some time, like I mentioned in the first half of the podcast. So let's keep that in the back of our minds. Winners first half offense, they're on it. Next is George Pickens. George Pickens, his stat line is not impressive. 2 catches for 39 yards. That's it. That's it. But he also had big plays that were negated by penalty. And I will say this, and this is the second week in a row he's had plays negated by penalty. If you didn't know this already, it's one of those situations where, I hate to sound like one of the young people, but they always say this, he is him. What they mean by that is that he is that guy. If you haven't noticed yet, as George Pickens, AJ Terrell in week 1 down in Atlanta, Pat Surtain now in week 2 in Denver, he is a wide receiver 1. And I know there's fans out there that they probably questioned that this past offseason as the Steelers were dipping their toes in trade waters with a bunch of different receivers. George Pickens is that guy. He is a wide receiver 1. He is a difference maker. And you saw plays made by George Pickens in this game against the Broncos. And even if they didn't count towards his stat line, man, it just proved that point even more that he is a difference maker. So he's on the winners list for that, because if fans haven't noticed it yet, you're not watching the same game that I am. The next one is a good feel-good story. We've got a couple feel-good stories here. Darnell Washington, 1 catch, 5 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 target. And Darnell Washington, this was his first target in the red zone yet. So he was a draft pick last year. Matt Canada and his system never once targeted Darnell Washington in the red zone. So that's a huge step forward. But Darnell Washington's his first touchdown of his career. And if you were watching the game, you watch the game like I do, I'm watching them, they're in the red zone, and I see all of a sudden Darnell Washington flexes out to the wide, out past the hash mark. He flexes out wide. And I notice what the defense does. They send a defensive back out on him. So it's a corner. And I said, my kids are there sitting with me. And I said, they're going to throw it to Darnell Washington. I know right now they're going to throw it to Darnell Washington. And I'm sure I wasn't alone. This is not like me being, Nostradamus here. And my oldest daughter goes, which one's he? I said, he's at the top of the screen by the end line there, the sideline. And so if you watch that play again, Justin Fields drops back, doesn't look anywhere else, throws it right to Darnell Washington, touchdown. They said, oh my gosh, how did you know they were going to do that? I said, because Darnell Washington is almost 7 feet tall and they got a really small quarterback on him. Kudos to Darnell Washington, Mount Washington, as the fans call him. He's a guy that does all the dirty work. It's cool to see him get some glory with a touchdown. The next winner is the Steelers' red zone defense. The Denver Broncos finished 0 for 3 in red zone trips. They only surrendered the Steelers defense, that is 6 points, and they did have an interception. So the Steelers red zone defense was stout. They did their job. There were moments where it was a bend don't break philosophy. They did their job. Phenomenal stuff. The Steelers red zone defense absolutely deserves to be on the list. The next winner, Corliss Waitman. So we know Cameron Johnston is lost for the year. The Steelers signed Corliss Waitman, and he goes into a very familiar area in Denver because he played there and he punted there. He had 8 punts, a 53-yard average, 3 touchbacks, 2 inside the 20. It was a great performance. I thought his best punt was the last punt. It was a punt where all the announcers were saying, There's no way they're going to punt the ball here. They're just going to punt it out of bounds. It's an all-pro returner. You're not going to risk this guy running it back on you. They kick it to him. Great coverage. He had great hang time on the punt, and they don't give up much of a return. Some time still ticks off the clock. It's set up that, you could see nothing was going to happen with that drive. Corliss Waitman, good story. Also great holding. Don't underestimate that. He had to hold 3 times, an extra point and 2 field goals. Did a good job in that regard as well. Corliss Waitman deserves to be on the winners list. Next, I'm going to combine 2 players. It's the Steelers' bookend pass rushers, Alex Highsmith and TJ Watt. I thought they had great games, and some of the impact they had on the game was not noticed. Alex Highsmith had 4 tackles. All of them were solo. He had a sack, 2 tackles for loss, and 1 quarterback hit. TJ Watt, 3 tackles, 2 solo, 1 sack, 2 tackles for loss, a pass defense, and 2 quarterback hits. I mean, add this stuff together, folks. 7 total tackles, 2 sacks, 4 tackles for loss, 3 quarterback hits, and a pass defense. These edge rushers were asked to do a lot. Alex Highsmith and TJ Watt, that everyone thought that the Steelers were going to blitz like crazy. Just blitz, blitz, blitz. They didn't. They just rushed their front. And even then, sometimes TJ Watt, they were trying to confuse Bo Nix. Oh, here comes TJ Watt. No, he drops into coverage. Great game plan. It worked. And you're going to rely on these 2 players being dynamic, and that's exactly what happened. Kudos to Highsmith. Kudos to Watt. Both deserve to be on the winners list, no doubt about it. The next feel-good story is Corey Trice. So Corey Trice, I mentioned his red zone interception. He definitely fooled Bo Nix. If you watch the replay of that play, the interception, you see that Corey Trice, the Steelers are running a zone concept. The receiver leaves his zone, and so he just naturally shades to the middle of the field. Bo Nix does not see him. He thinks he has an easy touchdown, and Trice steps up, makes the interception. The feel-good part of this is that Dante Jackson got injured or was dealing with cramping and stuff like that, and he left the game, and Trice had to be inserted into the game, and he actually makes this play. But you think about Corey Trice and how, man, he dealt with injuries in college. He deals with an injury in his rookie season. He's lost for the year after a pretty brutal knee injury in the first padded practice. Really cool to see this guy not just come back from those injuries, but to be making plays. It's a feel-good story. So Corey Trice is on the winners list for that red zone interception, the first interception of his young career, hopefully the first of many. The next winner is DeShawn Elliott. DeShawn Elliott led the Steelers in tackles with 9, had 4 solo, and 1 tackle for loss, a very big tackle on 3rd down. DeShawn Elliott, I said this last week, and I'll say it again. And I will say that I listened to the Steelers Fix this past week. I was traveling back from Morgantown, West Virginia, and I was listening to it. And boy, Andrew Wilbar was just not very complimentary of DeShawn Elliott, saying that he's just not that good. I don't think none of us are giving this guy enough credit. DeShawn Elliott has come in. He's been Terrell Edmonds plus some. Better ball skills. He's a better tackler. Plays the line of scrimmage better. And so while they got Terrell Edmonds, some people thought that he's just going to be inserted in the lineup. I think he's going to be a good addition, but I love what DeShawn Elliott's doing. And I should always say that when they signed DeShawn Elliott, I said, this guy's going to let Minka be Minka, and he will do that. But DeShawn Elliott's also making plays on his own. Kudos to him. It's cool to see number 25 out there roaming around, making plays like Ryan Clark used to. All right, the last one, the last winner, road wins. The Steelers have 2 of them. The stat line is never apologize for those. Winning on the road in the National Football League is tough. Anyone that tells you different is lying to your face. Winning on the road is difficult, and the Steelers have done it on back-to-back weeks. And then in week 3, they come back and they have the Chargers at home. Their first home game. That's going to be a tough test. The Chargers are playing good football. They're 2-0, running the ball well. We'll talk about that on Wednesday in the keys of victory and on Friday with behind enemy lines. But I will say that the Steelers should not ever have to apologize for winning 2 ugly games. Some would call them ugly. Some would say they're good wins. Doesn't matter. They win those games on the road. Never apologize for road wins. So there's your 9 winners in this game. Now you're probably thinking, Jeff, you have 6 losers. How do you have 6 losers? Well, You'll understand when we get through these. Let's start off with the losers of Brodrick Jones. He has to be atop the loser list. Why? The guy gets inserted into the lineup on the third drive. He commits 3 penalties in one drive. Doesn't even last the entire drive. He gets yanked before that. 3 penalties in one drive. Brodrick Jones, it was like watching someone self-implode. It was just one bad play after the next. And after the game in the Mike Tomlin's post-game press conference, they said, was he benched because of poor play? He said, you got it. And that was it. So I don't know what they're going to do with Brodrick Jones. I don't know. I'm going to get to the offensive tackle rotation here shortly, but I don't know what they're going to do with Brodrick Jones. I'm sure the young man's confidence is pretty much shot. I think they're going to have to do some repairs there, and then hopefully they can find a spot for him along that offensive line. But Brodrick Jones, that's a losing performance. The next loser are just the total number of penalties. The Steelers, you can say what you want about the officiating. We'll get there. But the Steelers are a highly penalized team. They were penalized 10 times, and these are just accepted penalties, mind you. This doesn't count the penalties that were negated by another penalty or penalties that were declined by the Broncos. 10 penalties for 74 yards. This comes down to discipline. It comes down to a coach and a coaching staff coaching these players in a way that they're not going to be susceptible to these type of penalties, pre-snap penalties, the constant holding penalties, the, even something like Van Jefferson on what would have been a George Pickens touchdown getting called for a pick. You have to know what to expect. They have officials at training camp. They play the preseason games. There's a feeling out period with the players and the officials. You got to clean it up. You have to clean it up. So people will talk about the officials, and rightfully so in certain situations, but the Steelers are not given the green light to just not have, I guess let me rephrase that. The Steelers are not being excused of their poor play in terms of being sloppy and undisciplined. The penalties are bad, and that's one of the areas that needs to be fixed the most moving forward. The next loser, someone, I guess it's Mike Tomlin, the offensive tackle rotation. And the stat line is easy. Why? That's it. So you want to start Troy Fautanu. We broke that news here on the Steel Curtain Network on Saturday. And I thought to myself, and Dave and I talked about this, Dave Schofield, when he joined me for that podcast, Dave brought up maybe they're going to rotate him. I just kept thinking, why would they rotate tackles? This isn't running back. This isn't wide receiver. This is not an individual type of position. This is a 5-man unit that has to work as one. A 5-man unit that has to communicate well. A 5-man unit that has to gel. So you're telling me you're going to have Troy Fautanu on the right side for 2 drives, and then you're going to take him out and put in a guy that warmed up and did all that stuff, and then stood on the sideline for 2 defensive drives and 2 offensive drives, and then say, okay, Brodrick, you're in. And you expect him to go into the game and just, I'm fine. Let's go. Let's hit the ground running. I don't think that is the style of that's conducive to success on the offensive line at all. What offensive tackle rotation? What are we doing? What are we doing? This makes no sense to me. Makes absolutely no sense to me. And so everyone wants to bemoan Brodrick Jones. And that's fine because the guy had one horrible drive. But I have to also say that I think that the decision to do this rotation was idiotic. Whoever thought of this in the coaching staff and at a meeting, whether it was Tomlin or one of his staff, and said, I've got an idea, coach. What if we rotate our tackles? And so, well, what do you mean rotate the tackles? Like we pick a starter and we go with the starter. That's what we do. Well, no, hear me out. What if we play Troy Fautanu for 2, and then we get Brodrick Jones in there and see what he does? And then someone, that has to be Mike Tomlin, had to say, that's a great idea. Let's do it. I think that's idiotic. I just can't get behind that idea. If you want to start the rookie, start the rookie. And if the plan is for Brodrick Jones, Brodrick, you're the swing guy right now, but I need you at left tackle and practicing left tackle, getting your reps at left tackle, getting your elbow right, all that stuff. Might take a couple weeks, but get there and be ready. quit messing this guy up. I feel like that's what's happening with the offensive tackle rotation or the offensive tackle position in general. This isn't a cut on Dan Moore. He's played good football. It's not a cut on Troy Falatanu. They clearly think he's good enough to start. So you got to figure out Brodrick Jones. You traded up to get him in 2023. Quit messing around. All right, let's go to the next loser, the officials. The stat line is a stat line. I think there were almost 20 accepted penalties in this game. Almost, I'm going to look it up real quick. But the penalties, the sheer number, the volume, 19 penalties accepted between two teams. The Steelers had 10 and the 9 for Denver. There was at one point, and I tweeted this out. I'm sitting here in my basement watching the game with my kids, and my 6-year-old, who doesn't know much about football, she just likes to yell at the TV. And they're throwing all these flags, just like every single play, flag on the play, flag on the play, flag on the play. She goes, "Oh my gosh, these flags." And I said, "Yep, I agree." And so this is an every week thing. So the stat line for the officials being on the loser list is, what's the fix? What is the fix for the officials being sometimes flag happy? What is it for them being sometimes inept? You look at the Dan Moore holding call that killed a play. I believe it was a swing pass to Calvin Austin III or a crosser that got a first down that negated that play. Would have extended the drive, and maybe the Broncos never get their second field goal. And then you see what happens to TJ Watt, and he gets mugged. It looks like someone has a rear naked chokehold from MMA on him, and they don't call that. So that's ineptitude from the officials. But what's the fix? I honestly don't know. I don't know if there's an easy fix. But the officiating in the NFL, it deserves the criticism, and it deserves to be fixed. But I just don't know what that fix is. All right, we have 2 more losers. The next one is the second half offense. The first half offense was on the winner list. The second half offense is on the loser list. The stat line, 62 yards, only 3 first downs, and 3 points. An entire half of offense, only 62 yards. So for as good as things were in the first half, they were equally as bad as in the second half. And that's lousy because the Steelers offense played well in the first half. They looked dynamic. And in the second half, while the penalties didn't help, I don't think the game plan helped. It seriously looked like Mike Tomlin in the second half said, look, if we have 13 points, we don't need any more. The defense is not going to let them score. And they were just cool to run it out. Let's manage the clock, which they did a great job, by the way, at the end of the game of managing the clock and really using their time wisely, forcing the Broncos to take timeouts. So I don't want to bemoan that, but the second half offense was bad. And the final loser, hey, look, this unit's in there every single week. It's either a winner or a loser, and that's third down offense. They're on the loser list. Why? I want to see the Steelers at 500 or better on third downs. And I know that the league average is 40%. I'm talking about 500. That's my standard, not the league's. I'm not asking for anyone else's standard. This is my standard. And the stat line for the Steelers' third down offense, 4 for 13. 4 for 13. That's not 40%. That's awful. That is awful. The Steelers have to do better in those downs and distances, winning those money downs. Talk about that all the time. So there you go. 9 winners, 6 losers. It's a win. It's a win. So like I said at the beginning of the show, make sure you check out the Steel Curtain Network Twitter feed at Steel C Network. It's going to have Monday, today, all the information so that you can win some free swag from the Steel Curtain Network store. Got to enter. You got to follow the directions. Don't miss out on that. Also on Tuesday morning, don't miss out on the mailbag tweet so that you can get your questions in that I'll answer them live on Wednesday's Let's Ride podcast. But that does it for me. I will be back on Wednesday. In the meantime, you finish these out. Be safe, be kind, and God bless. Steelers win. Be happy. They're 2-0. We'll see you Wednesday.